You're watching Noir Street. I'm your host, Nero Wolfe. Every story hides a secret, and every shadow hides a clue. Tell us where in the world you're watching from. Subscribe, tap the like button, and join us as we drift into mystery. Chapter 1. I have been told, by people who mean well, and by people who don't, that my face is too honest for my own good. I don't know about honest, but it is certainly visible, and on a December afternoon in Midtown that can be a felony. The trouble started because Nero Wolfe had sent me out with an errand that looked harmless: deliver a note to a broker named Ray Dunham and come back with a straight answer. Wolfe has a weakness for straight answers. It is one of the reasons he seldom gets them. The sky was the color of a used dish rag, and the wind had teeth. Fifth Avenue was dressed for the season. Lights on every cornice, wreaths in every doorway, and people hustling packages, as if the Lord himself had ordered them delivered by 6. The only thing that wasn't festive was the way everyone's eyes slid past everyone else. The New York habit of refusing to notice a man bleeding unless he's blocking traffic. Dunham's office was in a building that looked as if it had been designed to make you feel small and late. Brass, marble, and a lobby guard with shoulders like a refrigerator. I gave my name, got the elevator, and was shown into a waiting area that smelled of money, trying not to smell like sweat. Dunham came out of his inner office with the confidence of a man who sells other people's courage for commission. He was in his 40s, sleek, with hair that stayed in place through moral storms, and a smile that had never met a doubt it respected. "Archie Goodwin," he said, as if my name were a product he might or might not buy. "To what do I owe the honor?" I handed him Wolfe's note. Dunham read it fast, eyebrows lifting once, then his smile tightened. "Well," he said, "tell Mr. Wolfe I'm flattered, and tell him no." "Wolfe likes reasons," I said. "He collects them." Dunham's eyes stayed bright. "He can collect this. I don't deal with extortion." That was funny enough to deserve a laugh, but I didn't give it to him. "You called Wolfe, Mr. Dunham. You asked for him. Wolfe didn't wake up craving your charming personality." Dunham's jaw clenched slightly. "I asked because I'm being threatened." "And Wolfe asked," I said, "for a retainer and a meeting in his office. You declined the meeting and objected to the retainer. That's not being threatened, that's being cheap." His smile vanished. "Watch your mouth." "My mouth," I said, "is insured." That did it. Dunham stepped closer, his neat suit suddenly tight with anger. "You think you can come in here," he hissed, "and talk to me like I'm one of Wolfe's servants?" "I wouldn't," I told him. "Wolfe treats servants better." He moved around me toward the door, and I followed because Wolfe had asked for a straight answer, and Dunham had given me an evasive one dressed in indignation. In the outer office, a receptionist looked up. Alarmed, Dunham didn't slow. He marched out of the suite as if the hallway owed him space. I kept pace. "Mr. Dunham," I called, loud enough to carry. "If you're being threatened, Wolfe is the one man in New York who can make the threater regret it. If you're not being threatened, and you just wanted Wolfe to scare someone for you—" He spun on me in the corridor. "Shut up," he snapped. The hallway was busy. Clerks, a delivery man, 2 women in fur, trimmed coats. Dunham's voice cut through the office hum, and heads turned. "People like drama as long as it isn't theirs." I lifted my hand slightly. "Palms out fine. I'll shut up. But Wolfe will not. He'll come at you like a tax audit with teeth. And when he does, I won't be the one bleeding." That was the wrong line. Dunham's face flushed. He stepped in close, and his voice went low and ugly. "You think you're safe because you work for that fat bastard," he said. "You're not safe anywhere." I am not a violent man by nature, but I have a lively appreciation for being threatened in public. The crowd was thin but attentive now, the way a crowd always is when something might become a story they can tell later. I leaned in and let my own voice drop, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted every ear straining. "Then tell me," I said, "who's threatening you?" His eyes glittered. "You really don't know." That was interesting. Wolfe had sent me because Wolfe didn't know, and Wolfe hates not knowing. Dunham was telling me right there, that I should. Before I could press, Dunham raised his voice again, sharp as a slap. "Get away from me, Goodwin. I won't be blackmailed." That was loud enough to pull more heads. It also did something else. It planted a word, blackmailed, in the hallway like a seed. I said, equally loud, "I'm not blackmailing you, Mr. Dunham. I'm trying to keep you alive." The crowd loved that. A woman gasped. A man chuckled. A delivery boy stopped dead, eyes wide like he'd stumbled into a free show. Dunham's nostrils flared. He leaned forward, and for a second I thought he might swing. Instead, he jabbed a finger at my chest. "You followed me," he said. "Tell Wolfe to stop sending you. Next time I'll call the police." "You're welcome," I said. "Enjoy your evening." He turned and strode down the hall toward the elevators, shoulders stiff, head high. I stood there a moment and let the air settle. People resumed walking, disappointed the argument hadn't turned into blood. The receptionist exhaled and returned to pretending it wasn't her problem. I left the building because I had done what Wolfe asked, delivered the note, received the refusal, and collected the extra seasoning of Dunham's temper. The only thing I didn't have was the name of the man threatening him, which meant Wolfe would not be pleased. But Wolfe is seldom pleased and still eats well. Outside, the wind hit me again. I started toward the corner to hail a taxi. And because I have a visible face, and because December makes men hurried and careless, I didn't notice right away that someone had come out behind me. "Hey!" a voice called. I turned. It was the delivery boy from the hallway, a kid of maybe 19 with a cap pulled low and cheeks red from cold. He jogged up, breath puffing. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said. "Why," he glanced back at the building, "that guy, Dunham, he looked like he wanted to kill you." "He looked like he wanted to," I agreed. "He's a broker. They look like that when their lunch is late." The kid shifted, nervous. I heard what he said, about you not being safe. That's bad, right?" "It's New York," I told him. "Everything's bad if you listen long enough." He hesitated. "I'm Teddy," he said. "Teddy Klein. I work for the building. If something happens, people should know you didn't start it." That was an odd thing to say, and I filed it away. "Thanks, Teddy. I'll put you on my list of responsible citizens." He gave me a quick grin, then glanced over my shoulder and went pale. I turned. Ray Dunham was standing just outside the revolving door, a few yards away. He was looking at me with something like hatred, but not the controlled hatred from the hallway. This was sharp, sudden, as if he had seen something and decided it was my fault. He took 3 steps toward me. "You," he said. I sighed. "This is becoming a habit." He reached into his coat pocket. In Manhattan, that can mean a handkerchief, a wallet, or a funeral. I stiffened, and Teddy Klein stiffened with me. Dunham's hand came out holding. Nothing, or at least nothing I could see. His fingers were curled as if around something small. His face was suddenly slack, surprised. He opened his mouth, then he folded. It happened fast. One moment he was upright, stepping forward. The next his knees buckled and he went down on the sidewalk, with a sound like a heavy coat hitting concrete. People yelled. Someone shrieked. The revolving door stopped spinning, as if the building itself had decided to watch. I moved in because if a man collapses in front of you, you either run or you help, and Wolfe would have strangled me with my own tie if I ran. I knelt and grabbed Dunham's shoulder to roll him. My hand came back wet blood. Not a lot yet, but enough. A dark stain was spreading under his ribs, soaking into his coat. Teddy Klein made a choking sound. "Oh my God." Dunham's eyes were open but unfocused. His lips moved once, and nothing came out. His hand, still half curled, twitched and then went still. A woman screamed again. A man shouted for an ambulance. Someone pushed through the gathering crowd. 2 someones. Actually, in uniform, because in New York the police appear quickly when there's a crowd and slowly when there's a crime. "Back up!" One of them barked. "Back up!" I stood slowly, hands out, palms red. "He collapsed," I said. He's been stabbed. The cop's eyes took in the blood, took in my face, and narrowed. "Who are you?" "Archie Goodwin," I said. "Nero Wolfe's assistant." That name used to open doors. In that moment it closed one. Teddy Klein blurted, loud and desperate. He followed him. I saw it. He was arguing with him upstairs, and then he followed him out. I turned my head and stared at Teddy. His eyes were wide, and in them I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not concern, not civic duty fear. The kind that makes you say whatever you've been told to say. The cop's hand went to his cuffs. "You're coming with us," he said. "Wait," I said. "Listen, tell it to the inspector," the cop snapped. And as if the city had been waiting for that cue, Inspector Kramer himself appeared at the edge of the crowd, hat shoved back, face already annoyed. He saw the body. He saw me. His annoyance became satisfaction. "Goodwin," he growled. "What the hell did you do now?" I lifted my bloody hands again. "I got stabbed," I said. "By proximity." Kramer pushed through and looked down at Dunham, then up at me. "You were seen arguing with him," he said. "And now he's dead. And the witness says you followed him." "I did follow him," I said, "to keep him alive. Apparently I'm not as good at it as Wolfe." Kramer's eyes hardened. "Save it, cuffs." The cop stepped in, and over the noise and the sirens and the Christmas music pouring from a nearby storefront speaker like mockery, I heard my phone ring in my pocket, Wolfe's private line. I looked at Kramer, at the cuffs, at Teddy Kaline's terrified face, and at Ray Dunham's blood soaking into the city's dirty snow. Then I answered. "Wolfe," I said. His voice came calm and annoyed, as if I had interrupted him mid-orchid. "Archie, you are late." "I got detained," I said, watching Kramer. "Ray Dunham is dead, and I'm apparently the entertainment." There was a pause. One of the rare pauses Wolfe allows himself when new facts arrive. Then he said, very evenly, "Put Inspector Kramer on the telephone." I held the phone out. Kramer took it with a look that promised me future misery, and as Kramer listened, his face changed, just a little, from triumph to irritation. I didn't know what Wolfe was telling him yet, but I knew one thing for sure. Somebody had just written me into a story in broad daylight, and Wolfe was going to take it personally. Chapter 2. Kramer kept the telephone pressed to his ear as if he expected Wolfe to crawl out of it and bite him. His face did the slow shift it always does when Wolfe speaks to him, first irritation, then suspicion, then the grudging realization that he's being maneuvered by a man who hasn't stood up in 20 years. I stood there with my hands held out, palms red, while a patrolman tried to decide whether to be respectful or rough. It's a hard choice for them. They don't like to be respectful, but they like trouble even less. Kramer growled into the phone. Yeah, I got him. What the hell do you mean? Do it properly." He shot me a look that would have blistered paint. "You telling me how to make an arrest now?" He listened again. Then he said, all right, and thrust the phone at me as if it had burned him. Wolfe's voice came through calm and large, filling my ear the way his bulk fills the red chair. "Archie, they're still thinking of decorating me with handcuffs," I said. "They will," Wolfe replied. "Do not be melodramatic. Cooperate." "Wolfe." "Archie," he said. And when Wolfe uses my name that way, it means I'm about to be told to swallow something unpleasant for the sake of digestion later. "You will permit Inspector Kramer to indulge his instincts. It will cost us less than resisting him." "I could resist," I said. "I'm flexible." "You are also visible," Wolfe said. "Go with him. Do not answer questions beyond your name and address until Mr. Nathaniel Parker arrives." "Nate," I asked. "Yes, I have already telephoned him. He will attend you. Meanwhile, keep your temper and your mind." Kramer leaned in. "You done?" I covered the receiver. 1 second. Wolfe's voice lowered. "The witness. The young man." "Teddy Klein," I said. "Yes. Remember his name. Remember his fear. You will not allow him to vanish into the crowd." "I'll put him in my pocket," I said. "Right next to the blood." Do not be facetious, Wolfe snapped, and hung up. Kramer barked. Cuffs, and the patrolman obliged with more enthusiasm than skill. The steel closed around my wrists, cold and humiliating. Somebody in the crowd made a little satisfied sound, the kind New Yorkers make when they see someone else's day getting worse. As they guided me toward the patrol car, I turned my head and caught Teddy Klein's eye. He looked like he wanted to run through the pavement. "Hey, Teddy," I called, friendly. "Don't go far. I might need you to autograph your statement." His face twitched. Then he darted away into the crowd. Kramer saw it and scowled. "What was that?" "Civic engagement," I said. "He's excited." Kramer shoved me into the back of the car and got in beside me, close enough that I could smell his aftershave, fighting a losing battle with cold air. "You're in it up to your neck, Goodwin," he said. "I'm in it up to my cuffs," I corrected. "My neck is still negotiable," he snorted. "You were arguing with him upstairs. Then he's found stabbed, and a witness says you followed him out." "I did follow him out," I said. "If I had followed him into a hospital, we wouldn't be having this chat." "Save the jokes," Kramer growled. "You got any idea what that was about? The fight?" "It wasn't a fight," I said. "It was a broker throwing a tantrum because Wolfe asked him to do something sensible." Kramer's eyes narrowed. "What sensible thing?" "I'll tell your stenographer," I said, "with a lawyer." He swore. "You think you're protected because Wolfe's got lawyers." "I'm protected because I'm innocent," I said. "The lawyers are just decoration." The ride to the precinct was short and bumpy, and when we arrived, Kramer marched me inside, as if he wanted the building to know he had finally caught Archie Goodwin doing something besides smirking. The desk sergeant looked up, took in my cuffs and my face, and his expression brightened with the mild joy of routine. "Goodwin," he said. "Long time." "Hello, Marty," I said. "I'd say it's good to see you, but that would be inaccurate." They sat me in an interrogation room that smelled of old cigarettes and fresh ink. Kramer stood, arms folded, watching me like he expected me to confess to every crime since Prohibition out of sheer impatience. After 10 minutes, a uniform came in with a brown paper bag and set it on the table. "Found on the victim," he said to Kramer. Kramer nodded and waved him out. Then he opened the bag. Inside was a knife, not a switchblade or a gangster toy. A plain kitchen knife, 8-inch blade. Black handle, the sort of thing Fritz uses to carve a chicken with reverence. The blade was smeared dark. Kramer watched my face. "Recognize it?" "I recognize it as a knife," I said. "Congratulations." He reached into the bag again and pulled out something else, a crumpled piece of paper, damp from blood. "A receipt," he said, and his voice had the satisfied tone of a man unwrapping a present he knows you won't like. "From a hardware shop on 9th Avenue. Knife and sharpening stone bought today. Paid cash." He flattened the paper on the table, smoothing it like a priest smoothing a sermon. Then he jabbed a finger at the name written at the top. "Archie Goodwin." My name looked back at me in neat block letters. "That," Kramer said, "is you." "It's my name," I agreed. "Not my handwriting," Kramer's eyes gleamed. "Receipt's got your name. Knife's the same. Make they sell? Cash purchase, no credit card trail. And the guy who sells it says you bought it." "Does he?" I asked. "He will," Kramer said. I leaned forward, as far as the cuffs allowed, and examined the receipt. It was too neat. That's the only way to describe it. Hardware shop receipts are usually scribbled by bored men on cheap paper with pencils that have seen better decades. This one was written like a wedding invitation. Clean lines, careful spacing, every letter the same height. "That clerk must have been a calligrapher," I said. Kramer's mouth tightened. "You got an explanation?" "I do," I said. "Someone is setting me up." "That's your explanation," he demanded. "The oldest one in the book." "It's old because it works," I said. "Look at the ink. It's fresh and dark, like it was written 5 minutes ago. That paper's been in a pocket soaked with blood. If it was there from noon, it would be smeared like a toddler's drawing." Kramer stared at the receipt, then at me. For a second I saw the professional in him wake up. Then the personal in him shoved it back down. "Cute," he said, "but not enough." He started in with questions anyway. Where I had been, who I had seen, why I had argued with Dunham, what Wolfe wanted, what Dunham had meant by blackmail. I gave him my name and address, and then I shut up because Wolfe had told me to, and because Nate Parker hadn't arrived yet. Kramer's face got redder with every silence. "You think you're clever," he snapped. "I'm trying to be polite," I said. "It's hard with my hands tied." At last the door opened, and Nathaniel Parker came in, hat in hand, coat collar up, looking like a man who had been yanked out of a warm dinner to attend a predictable disaster. Nate took one look at me and sighed. "Archie," he said, "you collect trouble like stamps." "Some men collect orchids," I said. "We all have hobbies." Nate turned to Kramer. "Inspector, what's the charge?" "Murder," Kramer said. He enjoyed that word. Nate's eyebrows rose. "Do you have anything besides a crowd and your appetite?" Kramer slapped the receipt on the table. "Knife bought under his name, Cash Hardware Store." Nate read it, then looked up. "This receipt is absurd." Kramer stiffened. "It's evidence. It's theater," Nate said, and his tone had the dry calm of a man who has argued with Kramer for 20 years and expects to do it for 20 more. "My client isn't answering questions. If you intend to charge him, charge him. If you intend to hold him, produce probable cause. That isn't handwriting practice." Kramer glared. "I've got probable cause." Nate smiled thinly. "Then you won't mind if I call Judge Brackett and ask him to share your confidence." Kramer swore under his breath and left the room, slamming the door behind him. Nate sat and looked at me. "What happened?" I gave him the clean version. Argument in the corridor. Dunham collapses outside. Blood witness points at me like I'm the star of a cheap melodrama. Knife appears. Receipt appears. My name appears in handwriting that belonged on a Christmas card. Nate listened, nodding once or twice. When I finished, he said, "Wolfe told you to let them arrest you." "He suggested it," I said. "Wolfe doesn't tell me. He issues prophecies." Nate's mouth twisted. "He thinks letting Kramer have his fun will buy time." "It always does," I said. "Kramer burns time like coal. Wolfe likes to watch him do it from a safe distance." Nate leaned back. "You'll make bail. Wolfe will pay it if he has to, and then complain about it for a week." "I'm touched," I said. "Don't be," Nate replied. "Now, this hardware shop, 9th Avenue, you said," Kramer said. I corrected. "I haven't been to a hardware shop today, unless they sell sarcasm." Nate tapped the receipt. "We're going to go see it. Now?" I asked. Nate stood. "As soon as Kramer realizes he can't keep you without making his case look ridiculous. He'll release you to a desk appearance ticket or charge you and get slapped. Either way, we'll visit the shop while the clerk's memory is still fresh and before someone instructs him differently." That was Nate's version of strategy. Practical, direct, and full of phone calls. An hour later, after Kramer had stomped around enough to satisfy his pride, they uncuffed me and handed me a piece of paper that promised I would return to be humiliated again at a later date. Kramer leaned close and said, "Don't leave town." "I wouldn't," I said. "You'd miss me." Outside, the cold hit like a reminder. Nate hailed a cab and we went straight to 9th Avenue. The hardware shop was a narrow place squeezed between a laundromat and a discount bakery, with a bell over the door that jingled like an accusation. Inside it smelled of metal, oil, and old wood. Shelves held hammers, nails, cheap flashlights, and the kind of tools men buy when they intend to fix something, and then don't behind. The counter stood a man with grey hair and thick glasses, the sort of proprietor who has seen every variety of customer and likes none of them. He looked up when the bell rang, saw Nate's lawyer face, and frowned. "Yes," he said. Nate smiled politely. "Good evening. I'm Nathaniel Parker. This is Archie Goodwin. Do you recall selling him a kitchen knife today?" The man's eyes moved to my face. His frown deepened. "Maybe," he said. I smiled. "Maybe is encouraging." He reached under the counter and pulled out a ledger, handwritten, smudged. Real, he flipped pages with fingers stained by ink. Kitchen knife, he muttered, sharpening stone. He stopped. Yes, sold at $2.20. Nate nodded. And you sold it to Mr. Goodwin. The man peered at me. Name on receipt says so. I said, did you ask for my name? He hesitated. Number, he told me. I echoed. Describe him. The proprietor's eyes narrowed. Tall brown hair, good coat, clean hands, not like a carpenter. Not like me either, I said. I have the good coat, but my hair is prettier. Nate's voice was mild. Did he look like this man? He gestured at me. The proprietor stared longer. Then reluctantly he shook his head. Not exactly. Not exactly, I said. That's the most helpful phrase I've heard all day. The proprietor sniffed. He said he was Archie Goodwin, said he needed a knife for carving meat. Holiday. I glanced at Nate. Somebody's got seasonal humor. Nate asked, did he pay cash? Yes, the proprietor said. New bills. Did he sign anything? No, the proprietor replied. I wrote his name because he asked. Wanted it on the receipt. That made my stomach tighten. He asked you to write my name. Yes, the man said. Impatient now. People ask things. And you wrote it, I said. Neatly. The proprietor frowned. I write neat. Nate leaned in and examined the receipt copy Kramer had provided. This handwriting, he said, is not yours. The proprietor's eyes flashed. What? Nate held up the receipt. Look. The man leaned forward, peered, and his face shifted. Irritation giving way to confusion, then to something like alarm. That's not, he muttered. I don't write like that, I said. So someone made a receipt that looks like your receipt. The proprietor swallowed. Nate's tone hardened slightly. Did you give the customer a receipt? Of course, the man said quickly. I tore it from the pad, handed it over. And did the pad have carbon copies? Nate asked. No, the proprietor said. Cheap pad, no copies. Nate nodded. So the only original receipt was the one you handed the customer. And the one Kramer has, I said, is too neat and too clean to have been in a bleeding man's pocket. The proprietor looked sick. I don't want trouble. You already sold it, I said. Trouble comes free with purchase. Nate took out a card. Inspector Kramer will be contacting you again. Tell him what you told us, and tell him that receipt is a forgery. The proprietor took the card with trembling fingers. I will, he said, though his eyes said he would do whatever made the biggest man in the room stop talking. We left the shop and stepped back into the cold. Nate hailed another cab. To Wolfe, I asked. To Wolfe, Nate confirmed. He'll want every detail. He'll also want to complain about every detail. In the cab I leaned back and stared at my cuff marks, faint red rings on my wrists. So someone impersonated me, bought a knife, forged a receipt, and planted it on Dunham. Nate nodded, and arranged a witness to say you followed him. Teddy Kine, I said. He looked scared enough to swallow his own tongue. Nate glanced at me. That's important. Fear doesn't appear for free. When we reached the brownstone, Fritz admitted us with his usual calm. He took one look at my face and said gently, Archie, you are disordered. I'm fashionable, I said. Blood is in this season. Fritz's mouth tightened. Mr. Wolfe is waiting. Wolfe was indeed waiting. In the office behind his desk, looking as unruffled as if the day's main event had been a minor change in the orchid room humidity. A tray sat on the side table, coffee and sandwiches that smelled of roast beef and horseradish. Fritz's quiet way of insisting the world still had rules. Wolfe's eyes took in Nate, then me. You are home, he said, as if I had merely been delayed by traffic. I went sightseeing, I said. They showed me the inside of a precinct. Wolfe's gaze shifted to Nate. Mr. Parker. Nate nodded. The receipt is a forgery. The hardware clerk admits He did not write it, and the purchaser did not resemble Archie. The purchaser insisted on Archie's name on the receipt. Wolfe made a small sound satisfaction without warmth. As expected, I said, "So we're officially moving from suspicion to setup." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "We were there from the beginning, Archie. You are not a murderer. Therefore, someone wishes you to appear to be one. The question is why and for whom?" I sank into my chair and reached for a sandwich. "Dunham said he was being threatened," he shouted. "Blackmail in the corridor, like he wanted an audience." Wolfe's fingers steepled. "Yes, and he made certain there was an audience. That is significant." Nate sat, unfolded his coat carefully, and said, "Kramer will continue to press. He has a corpse and a convenient suspect." Wolfe nodded. "Let him. Time spent fighting him now would lose time later. He will eventually be compelled to follow facts. Until then, we proceed." I chewed, swallowed, and asked the question that had been sitting in my throat since the knife came out of the paper bag. "Wolfe," I said, "who benefits from me looking guilty?" Wolfe's eyes stayed calm. "The man who stabbed Ray Dunham benefits, and the man who threatened him benefits. They are likely the same man." "Or two men," I said. "One with a knife and one with money." Wolfe nodded slightly, approving. "Possibly. We will learn which by examining what was done clumsily and what was done well." He glanced at my wrists. "Archie, you were arrested because you were visible. You were framed because you are close to me. Someone wishes to reach me through you." "That's flattering," I said, "and annoying." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Indeed, now tell me precisely what Mr. Dunham said to you in the corridor. Every word you remember, not your interpretations, the words." So I did. I gave him Dunham's threat, "You're not safe anywhere," and the strange line, "You really don't know," and the way Dunham had shouted blackmail like it was an alarm. When I finished, Wolfe sat back, eyelids lowering. "Mr. Dunham," he murmured, "was either foolish or desperate." "Or acting," I said, thinking of the crowd, the witness, the planted word. Wolfe's eyes opened. "Yes, acting is possible. If he was acting under duress. If he was not acting, then he was killed, because he was about to reveal something." Nate asked, "Do you have a client connection? Why did Dunham contact you?" Wolfe waved a hand, dismissive. "He claimed he possessed information that would ruin him if exposed. He wished me to handle it discreetly. He refused my terms. He then staged a public quarrel with my assistant, and then he died." I said, "Which suggests he wanted the quarrel seen." Wolfe nodded. "And he wanted your presence documented, which means the frame was arranged before the knife touched him." Nate's voice was dry. "That's a comforting thought." Wolfe ignored that. He turned to me. "Archie, the witness, Theodore Klein." "Teddy," I said. "Delivery boy, building worker, scared, lied too quickly." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "You will find him, not tomorrow, now." I blinked. "Now, yes," Wolfe said. "He was planted or pressured. Either will lead to someone, Mr. Parker. You will handle the legal necessities. Archie and I will handle the truth." I stood with a sigh. "Wolfe, it's cold." Wolfe's gaze was bland. "Then you should walk quickly." Saul Panzer's name was not spoken, but I knew he would appear when needed. He always does. Wolfe didn't need to call him. Wolfe merely had to decide. I put on my coat, pulled my collar up, and headed for the door, cuff marks still burning faintly on my wrists. Behind me, Wolfe's voice came, calm as a commandment. "Archie, do not be arrested again tonight." I paused and looked back. "No promises," I said, "but I'll try to keep it to misdemeanors." Chapter 3, if there is any comfort in being framed for murder, it is that you stop worrying about small inconveniences like weather. The December wind on 35th Street tried to peel my ears off, but compared with Kramer's cuffs, it felt almost friendly. Saul Panzer was waiting on the sidewalk, as if he had been installed there by the city. He didn't wave, didn't smile, didn't even shift his weight. Saul's idea of hello is to already know where you're going. "You're looking for the boy," he said. "Teddy Klein," I replied. "Delivery kid." Sudden urge to accuse me with a straight face and frightened eyes. Saul nodded once. "He didn't invent it." "No," I said. "He recited it." We walked. Saul kept half a step behind me, not because he liked following, but because he liked seeing what followed. Wolfe had told me to find Teddy now, not tomorrow, which meant Wolfe had already decided. Teddy was a fuse, and someone was holding the match. We went back to the building where I had argued with Ray Dunham. The lobby guard recognized me and stiffened, as if murder suspects ought to be escorted by a brass band. "I'm not here to kill anyone," I told him, "just to talk." He grunted and lifted the phone. Saul's gaze slid over him, and the guard's hand paused a fraction of a second, as if his instinct had whispered that lying to Saul was unhealthy. The building manager came down, middle-aged, thin, with a tie that had given up. He looked from me to Saul and decided to be cooperative without being brave. "You want Teddy?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Where can we find him?" The manager blinked. He's not on shift." "That's surprising," I said. "He seemed so eager to participate in civic affairs." The manager swallowed. "He left early, said he felt sick." Saul's voice was quiet. "When?" "Right after." "After the stabbing," the manager said. "Where does he live?" I asked. The manager hesitated, then shrugged with the helplessness of a man who doesn't want trouble from either side. "Hell's Kitchen, rooming house on 48th. I can give you the address." He did. I took it, thanked him, and turned. Saul didn't move. "Anything else?" Saul asked the manager. The manager shook his head quickly. Saul watched him another half-second, then followed me out. On the way to the cab, I said, "Sick, huh, convenient." Saul's eyes scanned the street. Someone had told him to go, or someone told him he'd be made sick if he stayed. I said, "We found the rooming house on West 48th. Brick, narrow stairs that smelled like boiled cabbage and old disappointment." A woman with curlers and a cardigan opened the door to the ground, floor office, and stared at us as if we were selling religion. "I'm looking for Teddy Klein," I said. Young fellow, cap, red cheeks, guilty conscience. Her eyes narrowed. "He ain't here." "That's what they all say," I replied. "Before they say something else." Saul held up a small leather wallet, opened it just enough to show nothing useful, but plenty serious, and the woman's posture softened into fear. "All right," she muttered. "He's upstairs, 3rd floor, but he ain't feeling good." "That makes 3 of us," I said. We climbed. On the 3rd floor, door 3B had a cheap Christmas wreath hanging crookedly, like even the holly was tired. I knocked silence. I knocked again. "Teddy, it's Archie Goodwin. I'm here to thank you for trying to ruin my life." A sound inside. Something shifting, a breath caught. The door opened a crack. Teddy's eye appeared, wide and bloodshot. He saw Saul behind me and went paler. "Don't," he whispered. "Don't come in." "Too late," I said gently, and pushed the door with my shoulder just enough to widen the crack. Teddy backed away, hands up. The room was small bed, chair, a cheap dresser, and a window looking out on a brick wall that had never done anyone a favor. Teddy sat on the edge of the bed like a man waiting for a sentence. Saul closed the door behind us and stood near it. Silent. He didn't crowd Teddy. "Saul doesn't need to." "Teddy," I said, keeping my voice mild. "Why did you tell the cop I followed Ray Dunham?" Teddy swallowed. "Because I saw you. You saw me argue with him upstairs," I said. "And you saw me kneel by him outside when he fell. You did not see me stab him, because if you had, you'd be in a hospital instead of this room." His mouth trembled. "I didn't say you stabbed him." "You said I followed him," I replied. "That's the same thing in Kramer's language." Teddy's eyes flicked to Saul. "Who's he?" "Insurance," I said. "Now, who told you to say it?" "No one," Teddy whispered. "Too fast." Saul's voice came quiet and lethal the way it had come to Ben Morrow in another story. Only this time it wasn't lethal because Saul wanted blood. It was lethal because Saul wanted truth. "Teddy," Saul said, Teddy flinched. His shoulders sagged. "All right," he said hoarsely. "A man." He came up to me after the yelling in the hallway. "What man?" I asked. Teddy rubbed his hands together as if trying to scrub something off them. "Nice coat, clean shoes. Not like a delivery guy," he said. "He said if the police asked, I should tell them you followed Dunham. He said it was important." "Important to who?" I asked. Teddy's eyes filled. "He said it was important to keep the right people safe." Saul asked. "Did he show a weapon?" Teddy nodded. "Small. Not a gun. Just, he lifted his coat and I saw a knife handle. He didn't pull it. He just showed it like a reminder." My stomach tightened. "He threatened you?" Teddy's voice cracked. "He said if I didn't say it, my mother would get a visit. My mother lives in Queens. She's sick. All right," I said quickly. "Enough. Describe him." "Taller than you," Teddy said, staring at the floor. "Broad shoulders, maybe 40. Brown hair. He smelled like smoke. Not cigarettes. Like a fireplace." Saul's eyes narrowed. "And his voice?" "Calm," Teddy whispered. "Not angry. Like he was reading instructions." That fit. The men who panic are usually amateurs. The men who read instructions are part of a plan. "You didn't go to the police," I said. "You didn't tell them you were threatened." Teddy's face crumpled. "I was scared." "I know," I said. "Now you're going to be smart. You're going to come with us to Wolfe." Teddy jerked his head up. "No, that fat guy." "He's not fat," I said. "He's substantial, and he'll keep you safer than this room. Besides, Kramer will come back for you, and the man with the fireplace smell might come back first." Teddy's breathing went fast. "I can't." Saul's voice stayed low. "You can now." Teddy looked at Saul, and some decision collapsed in him. He nodded, miserable. "We got him out the back stairwell and into a cab before the landlady could ask for a tip." Teddy sat between Saul and me like a trapped rabbit. Saul stared out the window, scanning reflections. I watched Teddy's hands twist. "Ray Dunham," I said quietly. "Did you know him?" Teddy shook his head. "Just delivered stuff sometimes. Envelopes, packages." "From who?" I asked. Teddy blinked. "From his office, 2 places. A law office once, a developer's office." Saul's eyes flicked to him. "Developer." Teddy nodded. "Big guy, fancy building. Name on the door, Grieve." That name hit me like a cold finger. "Harlan Grieve," I said. Teddy looked relieved that I recognized it. "Yeah, that's it." When we reached the brownstone, Fritz admitted us and took one look at Teddy and went into his quiet, efficient mode. Tea, chair, warmth. Because Fritz can be kind without making a speech about it. Wolfe was in the office, seated behind his desk, looking as if the day had been designed to annoy him personally. When he saw Teddy, his eyes sharpened. "This," Wolfe said, "is the young man who accused my assistant." Teddy shrank. I Wolfe raised a finger. Teddy stopped stammering as if the finger were a switch. "Sit," Wolfe said. Teddy sat. Wolfe looked at me. "We're put." I gave Wolfe Teddy's story, nice coat, calm voice, threat with knife handle, instructions to say I followed Dunham. When I finished, Wolfe's mouth tightened. "As expected," he murmured. "Kramer chose that moment to barge in, because Kramer has a talent for arriving when you least want his face on your furniture." Fritz led him in, and Kramer's eyes immediately took in Teddy. "What's this?" he demanded. Wolfe's voice was bland. "This is Mr. Theodore Klein, Inspector. He is here to correct his earlier enthusiasm." Teddy's face went white. I didn't mean." Kramer lunged toward him. "You lied." Wolfe's voice cut like a snapped string. "Inspector, sit down." Kramer stopped, startled. Then he glowered at Wolfe and dropped into the yellow chair as if it had offended him. Wolfe turned back to Teddy. "Mr. Klein, you will tell Inspector Kramer, in my presence, precisely what occurred outside Mr. Dunham's building." Teddy swallowed hard and looked at me, then at Saul, then at Wolfe. Wolfe's eyes held him like a clamp. Teddy spoke. He told Kramer he had seen me arguing with Dunham in the corridor. He had seen me outside when Dunham collapsed. He had not seen me stab anyone. He had been threatened by a man in a good coat to tell the police I followed Dunham. The threat involved Teddy's mother. Kramer's face turned red, then purple. "You little idiot," he snapped. "You obstructed." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Inspector, do not waste your breath, use it." Kramer glared at Wolfe, then barked at Teddy. "Describe the man." Teddy did. Kramer scribbled, jaw clenched. When Teddy finished, Kramer sat back, eyes narrowing. "All right," he said grudgingly. "That helps." "It helps you," I said. "It helps me not go to prison for Christmas." Kramer scowled. "Don't get cocky." Wolfe's voice was dry. "Inspector, if you have finished roaring, perhaps you can provide information." Kramer jabbed his notebook shut. "Fine. We traced the knife." Kramer's glare sharpened. "Hardware shop on 9th. Cash, purchase, receipt with your name." "Yes," I said. "We saw the shop. Receipt's a forgery. Clark admits it." Kramer hesitated a fraction, which told me he already knew and didn't like that I knew first. He grunted. "Yeah, we'll see," Wolfe said. "Continue." Kramer exhaled, hard. "We dug into Dunham. Turns out he was slated to testify next week in a fraud case." That perked Wolfe's attention. "Against whom?" Kramer looked directly at me when he said it, because he enjoys watching trouble land on my face. "Harlan Grieve," he said. That name was not unfamiliar. In New York, developers are like weather, always present, always changing, always capable of causing damage. Harlan Grieve was a big one, sleek projects, glossy brochures, and the kind of political friendships that come with handshakes and envelopes. Wolfe's voice was calm. "The nature of the fraud?" Kramer grunted. "Investment scam tied to one of Grieve's developments. Dunham was a broker. He had documents. He was supposed to testify that funds were diverted and investors were lied to." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Then Mr. Dunham possessed leverage." "Exactly," Kramer said, satisfied to be agreeing with Wolfe, only because he had no choice. "And now he's dead." Wolfe steepled his fingers. "You searched his apartment?" Kramer's face hardened. "Yeah, and here's the best part. It's been scrubbed, clean as a whistle." I frowned. "Scrubbed by who?" Kramer snorted. "That's what we're finding out. No papers, no files, no computer, just empty." Wolfe's eyes sharpened further. "Not entirely empty." Kramer hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an evidence envelope. He tossed it on Wolfe's desk with more force than necessary. Inside was a torn piece of paper. Ragged edge, one word written in thick pencil ledger. I leaned in. That's it, Kramer said. Like someone wanted to tell us what we're missing." Wolfe stared at the torn page as if it were an insult, or wanted to mislead you about what you should seek. Kramer bristled. "It's a clue." "It is a provocation," Wolfe corrected. "There is a difference," I said. "Dunham was about to testify against Grieve. Someone kills him, scrubs his apartment, leaves ledger behind and frames me loud enough for a crowd to remember my face." Wolfe nodded slowly. "Yes." Kramer leaned forward. "So what, Wolfe? You think Grieve did it?" Wolfe's eyes flicked to him. "Inspector, I do not think in your manner. I examine Mr. Grieve may be involved, but he is too prominent to be the knife hand. He hires hands." Saul spoke for the first time since we returned, his voice quiet. "The man who threatened Teddy wasn't panicked." Wolfe nodded once. "Exactly. This was arranged. Mr. Dunham was to be silent. Mr. Goodwin was to be loud. I blinked. Loud. Wolfe's gaze held mine. Yes, Archie, the public quarrel, the crowd, the witness, the neatly planted receipt, all designed to make you conspicuous and to make the police act swiftly. While you are occupied defending yourself, the true object is removed. The ledger. I said. Wolfe's eyes narrowed at the torn page. The ledger, or whatever the word represents. Leverage. Proof. A list of diverted funds names. If Mr. Dunham was about to testify, his value was not in his person but in his documents. Kramer's mouth twisted. So they shut him up and made you the distraction, Wolfe nodded. Yes. Silence him. Amplify you. 2 tasks executed simultaneously. I said, which means the killer wanted Dunham dead and wanted me in trouble at the same time. Wolfe's tone was mild. Precisely, a competent plan. Kramer scowled. Competent enough to kill a man in front of a building. Wolfe lifted an eyebrow. Competence does not require subtlety when you can control the aftermath. Kramer pushed back from the chair. All right, I'll go squeeze Grieve. Wolfe's eyes hardened. You will accomplish nothing by squeezing a man surrounded by lawyers and friends. You will, however, alert him. Kramer bristled. So what do you want me to do? Sit here and drink your coffee? I want you, Wolfe said, to behave intelligently. Secure Mr. Klein's statement properly, protect him, and obtain for me the names of the attorneys involved in the Grieve matter, and the date and location where Mr. Dunham was to testify. Kramer glared, then grudgingly nodded. Fine, but you're not running this, Wolfe. Wolfe's mouth tightened. I am not running your department. I am salvaging it. After Kramer left, taking Teddy with him under a promise that his mother would not be left alone, the office felt quieter, like the house had exhaled. Fritz refreshed the coffee as if caffeine were a moral duty. I sat back and rubbed my wrists where the cuffs had bitten. So, I said, we've got Harlan Grieve as the big name in the background, Dunham as the leverage, and a missing ledger as the prize. Wolfe nodded. And you as the decoy. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Archie, you will now go to Mr. Dunham's apartment. I blinked. Kramer said it was scrubbed. Yes, Wolfe replied. That makes it more interesting. Not less. A room scrubbed clean is a room with intention, and the police won't like me nosing around, I said. Wolfe's tone was indifferent. The police seldom like anything useful. You will go with Mr. Panzer. He will keep you from being arrested again, which seems beyond your own abilities. Saul, standing by the door, gave a faint nod that in Saul language meant he agreed the world was risky and I was a problem. I stood, pulled my coat tighter, and headed out with Saul into the December night toward a dead broker's cleaned out apartment and a single torn word left behind like a grin, because someone had tried to make Dunham silent and me loud. And Wolfe was about to prove that in his house, noise is not an advantage. It's a liability chapter. 4 Ray Dunham's apartment looked like a man had moved out in a hurry and hired a maid to erase the embarrassment. The place had the polished emptiness of a showroom, no papers on tables, no jackets on chairs, no toothbrush by the sink. Even the air smelled washed, lemon, ammonia, and a faint insult. Saul Panzer stood in the living room and let his eyes travel the way a banker's eyes travel, a forged signature. Too clean, I said. Saul nodded once. Not police clean, different. The police, I said, leave dirt out of principle. We didn't find much. That was the point. But Wolfe had been right. Intention leaves marks even when it scrubs. The desk drawer slid a hair too smoothly, as if it had been emptied and wiped. The wastebasket liner was new. The bed was made with hotel corners. Someone had staged absence. In the kitchen, Saul opened a cabinet and lifted out a row of canned soup. Behind it, taped to the wall, was a rectangle of cleaner paint, where something had been removed. A folder, I guessed. Saul's mouth barely moved. Or a safe. We left without touching more than we had to. Saul hates leaving fingerprints the way Wolfe hates cold coffee. Outside, the city's holiday cheer was still blaring from loudspeakers and storefronts, and it felt obscene. A man had been stabbed in the afternoon, and New York was still trying to sell you a wreath. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe took our report without blinking, as if I'd told him the weather. He was at his desk, the Orchid Room schedule on one side and a plate of Fritz's roast beef sandwich on the other, managing civilization by refusing to be impressed by crime. Exactly as I expected. Wolfe said when I described the scrubbed apartment and the taped rectangle. They removed the leverage and left nothing that points to them. Except a torn page that says ledger, I reminded him. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Yes, a taunt, or a directive meant for the police. The doorbell rang then, and Fritz admitted a woman who looked like she had been ironed. She was in her late 50s, hair pinned and perfect, gloves on, eyes wide with the bright conviction of a person who enjoys certainty. "Mr. Wolfe," she said, and her voice had the sweet firmness of a church committee chair. "My name is Mrs. Alma Fenn. I was a witness to the dreadful scene. I felt I must come at once. Kramer had apparently started doing his job and the news had traveled, because witnesses don't usually seek Wolfe unless they've been pointed at him." Wolfe inclined his head an inch. "Madam, sit." She sat on the yellow chair, as if it were a seat of honor. "I saw you," she said. "You followed Mr. Dunham out. You were right behind him. I was kneeling beside him," I said. "Unless you've developed a talent for seeing time backward." Her lips pinched. "You can be charming, Mr. Goodwin, but you can't charm me out of what I saw." Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mrs. Fenn, your certainty is admirable. Tell me precisely where you stood." She didn't hesitate. Near the revolving door. I had just finished my shopping. I was waiting for my driver. "What were you shopping for?" Wolfe asked. She blinked. "Christmas gifts." Wolfe nodded, as if he had been told the hour. "And you observed Mr. Goodwin follow Mr. Dunham. How far?" "Across the lobby and outside," she said promptly. He was practically on his heels. I leaned back and watched her. It wasn't what she said. It was how quickly she said it. People who truly witness a shock tend to fumble the details. Mrs. Fenn delivered hers like a recital. Wolfe asked, "When Mr. Dunham fell, what did Mr. Goodwin do?" She drew herself up. "He pretended to help." "Pretended," Wolfe repeated softly. "Yes," she said, pleased. "He knelt at once, too quickly. I said, 'Madam, I've been accused of many things, but quick kneeling isn't one of them.'" Wolfe raised a hand and silenced me without looking. His gaze stayed on Mrs. Fenn. "Mrs. Fenn," he said, "do you belong to a group called Citizens for Safer Streets?" Her composure flickered. "Yes, it is a fine organization." "So I have heard," Wolfe said. "And it recently held a fundraiser, a luncheon. Tickets were not inexpensive." Her chin lifted. "Safety is worth supporting." "Indeed," Wolfe murmured. "And who asked you to come here today, madam? Was it your own initiative, or did someone from your safety group suggest that Mr. Wolfe should be informed?" Mrs. Fenn's eyes widened a fraction, then hardened. "No one asked me. I came because it was my duty." Wolfe's voice stayed gentle. "Of course." Fritz appeared at the office door. Discreet. "Mr. Wolfe, Mr. Loncohen is on the telephone." "A lunch counter across the street," Wolfe said, and there was the faintest note of satisfaction in his voice. A camera aimed at the sidewalk. 10 minutes later, Loncohen arrived with a hurried manila envelope and the triumph of a newspaperman who likes being useful. Wolfe had it set up, Lon's still frames spread on the desk like a poker hand. There I was, clear as day, stepping out of the building, pausing at the curb, turning my head to look for a cab, and behind me, half a beat, half a body length back, a hooded man in a dark coat, face angled down, moving with purpose. In the next frame, I turned away, arm lifted to hail a taxi. The hooded man kept moving. In the next, Dunham appeared outside the door, and the hooded man was already close enough to touch him. Lon said softly, "That's not you, Archie." My throat had gone tight anyway. Wolfe looked up at Mrs. Fenn, who had gone pale. "Madam," he said, "you have just witnessed your own error." She stared at the photographs, lips parted. Wolfe's tone remained calm, but it filled the room the way his bulk filled the chair. "This is the frame, a planted witness, a timed death, and a controlled story. You were positioned, by duty or by persuasion, to confirm what the killer required the police to believe." Mrs. Fenn's hands clenched in her lap. "I wanted to help. Wolfe nodded once. So do most instruments. They do not always choose the hand that plays them. He turned to me. Archie, you see. They needed you visible. They needed you loud, and they needed someone respectable to swear to it. I stared at the hooded figure in the photograph and felt the anger settle into place like a well-fitted coat. All right, I said. So who taught Mrs. Fenn her lines? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. We shall discover that by attending her fine organization's next safety gathering. Mrs. Fenn made a small, frightened sound. Wolfe regarded her coolly. Madam, you wanted to help. Now you will tell me who, precisely, spoke to you after the stabbing, and you will do it before the men who wrote your story decide you are no longer safe. Chapter 5. By the time Mrs. Alma Fenn finished wringing her gloves, she had wrung enough truth out of herself to be useful. Wolfe didn't bully her. He simply sat there and waited. Which is worse? People can withstand shouting. They cannot withstand silence that expects confession. It was after, she said at last, eyes fixed on the carpet as if it might offer advice. After the poor man fell, the officers were pushing people back. I was shaken. Yes, Wolfe said. And then, a gentleman spoke to me, she admitted. He was very courteous. He said I had done well to notice. He said the police might ask questions, and that I should be firm, he said. It was important for safety. Describe him, I said. Middle, aged, good coat, clean hands, she murmured. And I felt a small, sour satisfaction. Teddy Klein's man again, or his twin. He wore a pin, a little silver shield. He said he was with a community patrol. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. A safety group and a community patrol. How civic. Mrs. Fenn looked up frightened now. I didn't think. You did not think, Wolfe agreed. You felt. It is common and exploited. When Kramer called an hour later to demand Mrs. Fenn for a formal statement, Wolfe surrendered her with the air of a man lending a book to someone who doesn't deserve paper. As soon as the door closed behind her, Wolfe turned to me. Goodwin, we will now visit the hardware shop again, he said. I blinked. We already did with Nate. Yes, Wolfe replied, but we did not examine the shop's records with the proper pressure. Mr. Parker was concerned with your liberty. I am concerned with my time. Saul Panzer was already standing by the door, which meant Wolfe had decided pressure was required. Saul doesn't need to speak to be persuasive. He merely occupies space with intent. We went. The bell over the hardware shop door jingled the same sad note, but the proprietor's face changed when he saw Saul. Some men can argue with lawyers. They don't like arguing with men who look like they don't argue. Mr. Wolfe sends his regards. I told the proprietor, which was a lie, and therefore easier than the truth. I already told the lawyer, he said, defensive. It wasn't him. We know, I said. Now we want to know who it was. The proprietor wiped his hands on a rag that would have been cleaner if it had not existed. I don't know, he insisted. Saul's voice came, quiet and final. You know what he bought. You know what else you sold today, show us. That did it. The man hesitated one beat, then reached under the counter and pulled out his sales ledger again, smudged, honest, and scared. He opened to the day's page. Here, he muttered, stabbing a finger. Knife, sharpening stone, 2.20. And this, I asked because my eye had caught a repeating entry farther down. The proprietor squinted. Community patrol supplies, he said reluctantly. They buy things, flashlights, batteries, gloves, sometimes knives, sometimes. Saul asked. The proprietor swallowed. More lately. How many? I pressed. He flipped pages back, not far. 2 weeks. The same entry showed up again and again, knife model 8-inch, black handle, in quantities that made my stomach tighten. Bulk, I said. The proprietor nodded, miserable. They come in, 2 men. Good manners. They pay cash. They don't haggle. They say it's for patrol. Saul asked. Who authorizes it? Nice. Comes once a week with a list. Says it's for the neighborhood. Name? I asked. He hesitated. Saul looked at him. The man cracked like stale bread. She said Fen, he blurted. Alma. But maybe that was just. I stared. Mrs. Fen. The proprietor's hands fluttered. I don't know, she said it. She smiled. She said safety. Saul's eyes narrowed slightly. Did she sign anything? No, the man said quickly. Cash, always cash. Wolfe would have enjoyed that. Cash purchases, civic language, bulk knives. Not a lone man in a hurry. An organization in motion, I asked. Where are these knives going? The proprietor swallowed. They have a storage room, he said. Some church basement, or a community center. They talk like that. They don't tell me addresses. Saul's voice was calm. You can tell us who else shops for them. The proprietor nodded, flipping pages again. A tall man, brown hair, clean shoes, smells like smoke, like a fireplace. That matched Teddy's man so neatly it was almost insulting. I leaned back and let it sink in. So someone bought my knife under my name, I said. But someone else has been buying stacks of the same knife model for community patrol supplies. Saul looked at the ledger a moment longer, then said, This isn't impulse. No, I agreed. This is inventory. We left the shop with the proprietor's reluctant cooperation and a photograph of his ledger page that Lon Cohen would love. Back in the street, the wind was still sharp. But my mind was sharper. In the cab, Saul said, You think Mrs. Fen is involved? I think she's useful, I said, whether she knows it or not. Saul's eyes stayed on the mirror. Wolfe will. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened to our report with the faint, satisfied irritation of a man whose predictions keep coming true. Bulk purchases, he murmured, and always cash, always civic language, always a patrol, I said. Not a lone impulse killer, organized access. They stocked the same knife model in quantity, then used one to plant on Dunham and point at me. Wolfe nodded once. Yes, the frame required tools and coordination, and if they possess coordinated access, they possess coordinated motive. I frowned. Motive beyond killing Dunham. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Mr. Dunham's leverage concerned a fraud case tied to Harlan Grieve. To protect that enterprise, they required his silence and your noise. A group that can purchase in bulk and recruit respectable witnesses can also handle documents. Which means, I said slowly, the ledger is in their hands. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Almost certainly. And the community patrol pin, I asked. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. We will discover what organization uses it. There are only so many ways to disguise force as virtue. I sank into my chair, feeling the case settle into a new shape, cleaner, colder. So, I said, we're not chasing one killer with a knife. We're chasing a system with a supply list. Wolfe's eyes held mine. Precisely, Archie, and systems. Unlike men, do not act on impulse. They act on schedule. He reached for the orchid, room bell, as if to reclaim his evening. Tomorrow, we will attend a safety meeting. Chapter 6. If there is one thing New York does better than Christmas lights, it is hiding the machinery that keeps the lights on. The city smiles, jingles, sells you a wreath, and behind the wreath, a man takes an envelope and pretends it is only paper. Wolfe didn't leave the house, of course. He merely shifted his bulk, rang for Fritz, and told me, between bites of breakfast and a glance at the orchid schedule, that I would be doing something distasteful for the sake of cleanliness. Goodwin, he said, today you will observe Mr. Grieve's shadow. Grieve has a shadow? I asked. He looks like the type who hires sunlight. His security contractor, Wolfe corrected, eyes half-lidded. The pin Mrs. Fen described is used by a company called Harrogate Protective. How do you know that? I demanded. Wolfe's gaze slid to me as if I had asked why the sun rises. I telephoned 3 persons who know such things. Unlike you, Archie, they are discreet. Saul Panzer, seated near the door with his usual stillness, said, "Harrogate has a Midtown office. They contract for developers." "Like Harlan Grieve," I said. "Like Harlan Grieve," Wolfe agreed. "You will go. Mr. Panzer will accompany you as far as necessary. Your task is to learn whether Harrogate's habits match our case." "Habits like bulk knife shopping?" I asked. "Habits like bribery," Wolfe said blandly. "A firm that sells protection often buys cooperation." That's Wolfe. He can make corruption sound like bookkeeping. Saul drove. He likes driving because the car can be controlled. Unlike people, we parked across from Harrogate's building and waited. The lobby was glass, the sort of glass meant to say we have nothing to hide, while reflecting your face so you can watch yourself be ignored. A man came out at 10:30, sharp grey suit, good shoes, shoulders that suggested he had once enjoyed trouble and now preferred to sell it. He wore a small silver shield pin on his lapel, just like Mrs. Fenn had said. Saul murmured, "That's him, Len Ferris. Operations." "How do you know that?" I asked. Saul's eyes stayed on Ferris. "I read." Ferris walked with purpose but not hurry. He wasn't running errands. He was keeping appointments. We followed at a polite distance, blending with office workers and holiday shoppers. Ferris crossed to a coffee cart, bought a cup. He didn't drink, and continued. "A man who buys coffee and doesn't drink it is either sick or nervous." Ferris looked neither. That meant the coffee was cover. He turned into a narrow side street and entered a dry cleaner. I raised my eyebrows. "Getting his socks pressed," Saul said. "Watch." Through the window we saw Ferris step to the counter. The clerk, a thin man with an anxious face, handed Ferris a ticket. Ferris didn't look at it. He slid something across the counter with 2 fingers, an envelope, small and thick. The clerk's hands moved fast. The envelope vanished. Ferris nodded once, took a garment bag, and left. We stayed outside. When Ferris was gone, Saul went in alone and came out 2 minutes later with his expression unchanged, which meant he had learned something and didn't intend to share it with the clerk. "Bribe pattern," Saul said as we walked. "Same place, same day, every week. For what?" I asked. Saul's mouth barely moved. "Information, cooperation, a phone line." We followed Ferris to a second stop, a parking garage office. Same envelope movement, same quick disappearance. Then a third, a tiny storefront that claimed to repair office machines, but had no customers and too many men sitting still. By noon, I had a clear picture. Harrogate's operations man didn't just buy coffee, he bought silence. We returned to the brownstone with the day's smell still on us, cold air, exhaust, and the faint sourness of watching money change hands without receipts. Wolfe listened as I reported it, eyes narrowed in satisfaction that was not quite pleasure. "Regularity," Wolfe murmured. "A schedule. That is always the mark of organization," I said. "Ferris pays envelopes to places that don't need envelopes. A dry cleaner, a garage office, and a machine shop that never fixes machines." Wolfe nodded. "Harrogate is purchasing access. But to what?" I pulled out a scrap of paper Saul had given me in the car. "To phone routing," I said. Saul talked to a man who talks to men. One of those stops, dry cleaner, shares a back room with a phone relay. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "Explain." "Not me," I said, and nodded at Saul. Saul spoke in his quiet way, as if listing groceries. "Harrogate pays for a private exchange. Calls can be routed, masked, forwarded. Dunham's last call," Kramer gave the time, "came through that exchange." Wolfe's gaze held steady. "You obtained the call record." Saul nodded once. "Not official, but accurate." "That," I said, "means Dunham called someone who didn't want his number seen." Wolfe steepled his fingers, and that someone used Harrogate's exchange. I felt the puzzle tighten. So Dunham's last call wasn't to Grieve directly. It was to the contractor, or to someone using the contractor, Wolfe corrected. "Mr. Grieve is a developer. He builds structures. Harrogate provides structure of another kind." I frowned. But why run Dunham's call through Harrogate? Why not just meet him? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Because the caller wished to control the record. A private exchange leaves fewer honest footprints. It also allows prediction. Prediction of what? I asked. Wolfe's voice went colder. Of police steps. Inspector Kramer moved quickly, too quickly. For a case that should have required confirmation, a planted witness, a forged receipt, a knife already waiting. These are not merely preparations, they are anticipations. I stared at him, meaning the killer knew how Kramer would react. Or ensured it, Wolfe said. There are moments when Wolfe makes a room feel smaller without moving. That was one, I said. Influence. Wolfe nodded once. Influence in the police, or in the prosecutor's office, or in the channels that feed them. A man who can predict procedure can shape it. And Harrogate's buying access, I said. So the shadow isn't just muscle, it's a switchboard. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Yes, and switchboards are useful to men who traffic in controlled stories. I leaned back, letting the city's bright holiday nonsense drift past the office windows like cheap music. So we've got a developer tied to a fraud case, a broker about to testify, a missing ledger, a civic safety group that buys knives in bulk, and a security contractor that can mask calls and grease palms. Wolfe's eyes held mine. Archie, you are beginning to sound intelligent. I'll apologize, I said. Wolfe ignored it. Tomorrow we attend the safety group fundraiser, he said, and we will determine whether its purpose is safety or the manufacture of witnesses. Saul by the door added softly, Ferris will be there. Wolfe's eyes narrowed, pleased. Excellent. Then we shall greet the shadow and compel it to stand in the light. Chapter 7, Bad News, has a talent for arriving in the middle of breakfast, usually when Wolfe has buttered his toast and believes, for a moment, that the universe is capable of decency. Fritz had just set down the tray. Coffee for me, chocolate for Wolfe, and eggs arranged with the kind of care you normally reserve for a baptism. When the telephone rang, Wolfe lifted the receiver with annoyance already loaded. He listened for 10 seconds. His eyes narrowed. He said one word, "Indeed," and replaced the receiver as if it had offended him personally. "The hardware clerk," he said. I put down my fork. "What about him?" "He has been beaten," Wolfe replied, "and he has discovered a sudden devotion to the police position." That meant only one thing. The man who had been willing to say not Archie yesterday had decided this morning that Archie was a perfectly reasonable choice. After all, I stood. Kramer will love that. He already does, Wolfe said. Inspector Kramer is on his way here to share his delight. Right on cue. The doorbell rang with the blunt authority of a man who never worries about being invited. Fritz admitted Kramer, who came in with his hat shoved back and a grin that tried to look like professionalism. Well, Kramer said, seeing me at the table. How's the murderer eating today? Eggs, I said. I thought I'd start with something that doesn't fight back. Kramer snorted and turned to Wolfe. Your boy went over to that hardware shop and leaned on the clerk. Wolfe's eyes stayed calm. Did he? Clark says so, Kramer said. He says Goodwin came in with a big, tough guy. He nodded towards Saul, who was standing near the door like a piece of quiet furniture, and scared him into saying the receipt was fake. Saul didn't blink. I did because it was the first time all morning anyone had accused me of improving my manners. And the beating? Wolfe asked. Kramer's grin thinned. Clark got jumped last night. Says it was 2 guys. Maybe. He shook up. Says he doesn't want trouble. Says he can't be sure now who bought the knife. He can't be sure, I repeated. How convenient. Do his injuries make him forget his own handwriting too? Kramer's face hardened. Don't get smart. Wolfe's voice turned cool. Inspector, you mistake your role. You are not here to gloat. You are here to listen. Kramer bristled. Listen to what? Your fairy tale? I got a dead man and your assistant with his name on a receipt. Wolfe rose, slowly, heavily, and the room changed. Wolfe doesn't often stand, and when he does it signals that someone has stepped on the wrong flower. Sit, Wolfe said. Kramer hesitated, then sat in the red chair without permission, because anger makes him careless and Wolfe's size makes him obedient. Wolfe did not sit. He moved to his desk and pressed a button. "Archie," he said, "bring the envelope." I went to the drawer and pulled out Lon Cohen's packet. The lunch counter-footage stills, crisp and merciless. I laid them on the desk. Wolfe's finger tapped the frame where I turned away, and the hooded man moved behind me like a line being drawn. "Inspector," Wolfe said, "observe." Kramer leaned forward, eyes narrowing. He scanned the images, jaw tightening as the obvious became unavoidable. "That's not him," Kramer muttered. "No," Wolfe agreed. "That is the man who trailed Mr. Dunham." Kramer looked up sharply. "Where'd you get this?" "From a camera across the street," Wolfe said. "The city is full of witnesses that do not accept bribes." Kramer's mouth twisted. "Photos can be—" Wolfe cut in. "The footage has been verified by Mr. Cohen and will be available to the district attorney by noon if you continue to indulge fantasies." Kramer's face reddened. "You threatening me?" "I am educating you," Wolfe said. "If your clerk now claims he cannot remember, it is because he has been instructed by pain. That does not strengthen your case, it reveals its authors." Kramer slapped the table with his palm. "All right, so somebody beat him. That doesn't clear Goodwin." "It does," Wolfe said, and the certainty in his voice hit harder than Kramer's hand. "Because the purpose of the beating was not to discover truth, it was to suppress it, and suppression indicates the truth is dangerous." I leaned in. "And making it look like I threatened him is a bonus. Keeps Kramer's faith intact." Kramer glared at me. "You got a wise mouth for a guy who could still end up in a cell." Wolfe's gaze didn't leave Kramer. "Inspector, this has become a tug. Of war you pull with certainty. I pull with facts. The rope will not break in your favor." Kramer's nostrils flared. "You think you're running this?" "I think," Wolfe said, "that you are being handled again. The killer expects you to cling to your first conclusion because it distracts you from the second." Kramer's eyes narrowed. "Second what?" Wolfe's voice dropped. "The ledger, Mr. Dunham's leverage, the fraud matter tied to Mr. Grieve. While you pursue my assistant, the true objective remains hidden." Kramer stared at the photos again, reluctant, angry, and, beneath it, uneasy. Because Kramer's worst fear is not being wrong, it is being used. He shoved back from the desk and stood. "Fine," he growled. "I'll take this to the lab. I'll talk to Cohen. You will also," Wolfe said, "assign protection to the hardware clerk. Since he has been assaulted once, he may become less useful permanently." Kramer shot him a look. "You giving orders?" Wolfe's mouth tightened. "I am preventing incompetence." Kramer muttered something unprintable and headed for the door, then stopped and looked back at me. "And Goodwin," he said, "don't go leaning on any more witnesses." "I'll only lean on furniture," I told him. "It complains less." After he left, the office settled into its usual calm, the calm of a house that refuses to admit it has been invaded. Wolfe sat again, carefully, and reached for his chocolate as if it were a remedy. Saul's voice came quietly. "They're tightening." "Yes," Wolfe said. "They are attempting to remove every loose thread. The clerk, the witness, the record." I rubbed my hands together, feeling the old familiar irritation come back, the kind that means I'm alive and not in jail. So now we have a beaten clerk who retracts, and me looking like a thug in a good coat. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "That is the intention. Your image is the battlefield." "Great," I said. "I always wanted to be public property." Wolfe ignored that. "Goodwin, the next move will not be against you," he said. "It will be against the facts." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Wolfe's voice was calm, but it carried a warning. "They have learned that evidence exists outside their control. Cameras, core routing patterns of bribery. Therefore, they will attempt to control what remains, the narrative." He looked at Saul. "Mr. Panzer, you will locate Mr. Len Ferris quietly." Saul nodded once, already leaving in his mind. Wolfe looked at me. Archie, you will visit Mr. Cohen. I want every inch of that footage. Time stamps, angles, faces, the hooded man's shoes, if possible. I stood. You think the hooded man is Harrogate? Wolfe's gaze turned icy. I think the hooded man is employed by someone who believes he can predict the police. Today we reminded him he cannot predict me. As I put on my coat, Fritz appeared with my hat and scarf like a man arming a soldier with knitwear. Be careful, Archie, Fritz said softly. I'm always careful, I told him. I just have bad luck with other people's plans. Wolfe's voice followed me out of the office, heavy and certain. No, Archie, you have excellent luck. If you did not, you would already be dead. Chapter 8. Lon Cohen's newsroom smelled like ink, coffee, and men who'd trade their grandmothers for a clean headline. Lon himself was leaning over a light table when I came in, squinting at frames as if he could bully the truth into sharper focus. Archie, he said without looking up, you're trending. I've always been fashionable, I told him. Show me the shoes. He slid a still toward me. The hooded man behind me was a blur of coat and purpose, but one detail held steady like a signature. The shoes, dark, square-toed, with a faint scuff on the left. Not expensive enough to brag about, not cheap enough to notice. Exactly the kind a man wears when he expects to walk away unseen. I tapped the scuff with a finger. That's my dance partner. Lon nodded. I've got 3 angles, the camera across the street, the lobby camera, and the counter camera. He keeps his head down, but he doesn't hide his feet. Feet, I said, are honest, faces lie. Lon grunted. You want a copy? I want everything, I said. And I want it before Kramer decides film is a conspiracy. I left Lon with my sarcasm and returned to the brownstone with a packet thick enough to stop a small bullet. Wolfe took one look at the stills and nodded, as if I had delivered the morning mail. You have confirmed that our hooded man is real, Wolfe said. I try to keep things real, I replied. Now we need where he hangs his coat. Saul Panzer supplied that. He came in quietly, as always, and placed a slip of paper on Wolfe's desk. Storage, Saul said. Dunham, not in his name, in his assistant's unit on 11th Avenue. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. How did you locate it? Saul's expression didn't change. People rent units, people talk. Wolfe nodded once. Good. Mr. Goodwin and Mr. Panzer will go. If there is a ledger, retrieve it. If there is danger, avoid it. I do not wish to hire Mr. Parker for a second murder. I stood. You say that like it's a bother. It is, Wolfe said, and waved a hand as if dismissing me into the weather. The storage place was a long, low building that looked like a warehouse pretending to be respectable. A desk in front, rows of roll-up doors behind, and fluorescent lights that made everyone look guilty. A clerk with a bored face checked Saul's identification with sudden interest, then checked mine with a second look that wasn't boredom anymore. You're Archie Goodwin, he said. I'm also Santa Claus, I replied. Where's the chimney? Saul slid a paper across the counter. Authorization, key code, something that would satisfy paperwork without satisfying curiosity. The clerk shrugged. Curiosity is optional when Saul is present. We walked down the corridor of units, the metal doors lined up like shut mouths. Saul stopped at 3C small, plain, padlock new. C, I murmured. That letter's getting popular. Saul took out his tools, and the lock gave way with a soft, reluctant click. He rolled the door up 2 feet, just enough to see inside, then stopped. Light, Saul said. I clicked my flashlight on and swept it over cardboard boxes, a folded chair, a cheap lamp, and tucked behind a stack of moving blankets, a flat metal file box. That, I said, isn't somebody's Christmas ornaments. Saul lifted the box and set it on the floor. It was locked too, but cheaper. Saul opened it without ceremony. Inside were folders, each labeled in Dunham's tight hand, Grieve, Project California, LS Pennsylvania Yoffs. The last one made my stomach tighten. I opened it. The first page was a ledger, plain as sin, names, dates, amounts, and notes. The column headings were simple: paid, received, route, and beside multiple entries, regular as rent, was a mark in pencil: monthly. I stared at it until the letters stopped swimming. "See," I said softly. "Monthly." Saul's eyes moved over the page. "C could be Kramer," I snorted. "Kramer doesn't take monthly. He'd take daily just to be sure." Saul didn't smile, but his eyes held the same thought I had. C was someone who mattered enough to be paid like a utility bill. I snapped photos quickly. Every page, every name, then I heard it. A sound down the corridor, metal rolling, the faint squeal of a door being lifted. Saul's head angled. "We're not alone." I slid the ledger back into the folder into the box, and held the box close, like it was a baby, and I was suddenly maternal. Saul stepped out of the unit, gun low, and pulled the storage door down to a slit, leaving us a view of the corridor. Footsteps, soft, measured. Not a clerk, not a customer dragging boxes. Someone moving like they knew where they were going. A shadow stopped outside the next unit, a hooded figure, dark coat, head down. He bent. His shoes caught the fluorescent light. Square toe, left scuff. Me throat tightened. "That's him," I whispered. Saul's voice stayed calm. "Stay back." The hooded man produced a small tool and went to work on a padlock with quick, practiced motions. No hesitation, no fumbling. A man who had done it before. He finished, lifted the door, and froze, because our door, 3C, was not fully down. It was down enough to look closed to a glance, but not enough to hide Saul's shadow behind it. For half a second we stared at each other through the slit, his face still hidden. Saul's face unreadable. Then the hooded man moved. He lunged toward our door, hand coming up, not with a gun but with a short blade. The kind a hardware store sells by the dozen. Saul stepped forward and kicked the storage door up hard. It slammed into the hooded man's shoulder, throwing him back. The blade skittered, clinking on concrete. The hooded man recovered fast. Too fast, he didn't fight. He ran. Saul was after him, but Saul is disciplined. He didn't chase blindly through a maze of doors. He moved fast and controlled, cutting angles. I followed with the file box, banging my ribs and my lungs, screaming Christmas carols without my permission. The hooded man reached the end of the corridor and shoved through a side exit. Saul hit the door a beat later, yanked it open. Empty alley. A delivery truck idling at the curb. A driver looking away too deliberately. Saul stopped, eyes scanning. "Planned, everything is," I gasped. "Except my cardio." We went back inside, because the ledger mattered more than pride. The clerk was on his phone now, voice high and frightened, trying to explain to someone that something happened, without admitting he had no idea what. Saul flashed a look at him that said, "Forget what you saw, and you'll live longer." The clerk nodded like a man accepting religion. We were back at the brownstone within the hour. Wolfe took one look at the file box and the photos, and went very still. He read the page with C monthly twice, then set it down as if it were dirty. "They came for it," Wolfe said. "They came while we were there," I replied. "And I saw his shoes. Same scuff, same square toe, the hooded man from the footage." Wolfe's eyes narrowed, pleased in a way that never looks like pleasure. "Excellent. You have tied the shadow to the intrusion." I leaned forward. "What does it mean, Wolfe? Why kill Dunham, scrub his apartment, frame me, just for a ledger?" Wolfe tapped the page once with a thick finger. "Not just a ledger, a pipeline." "A pipeline?" I repeated. "Yes," Wolfe said. "This is not a single fraud. It is a system of payments. Monthly, regular, predictable. Protection money disguised as civic virtue and security contracts." Mr. Dunham was about to testify. The ledger would have exposed the pipeline. Therefore he was silenced, and the ledger was to be buried. "And when it wasn't," I said, "they tried to take it again." Wolfe's gaze turned icy. "Precisely. The true motive is not vengeance, nor panic, nor a knife. It is continuity. They will commit murder to preserve a monthly payment." Saul spoke softly from the doorway. Then someone important is C. Wolfe nodded once. Yes, Mr. Panzer. And because they pay him monthly, he is not merely important. He is relied upon. I sat back, feeling the case tighten like a noose around the right neck at last. Wolfe looked at me. Archie, you have done well. Now do not be foolish. We will not hand this ledger to Inspector Kramer until we have ensured he cannot lose it, or be persuaded to misplace it. And how do we ensure that? I asked. Wolfe's mouth tightened. By forcing the story out of their control publicly. Outside, the city kept jingling. Inside, Wolfe had just decided to make someone stop paying monthly. Chapter 9. Wolfe does not gamble. He will play a game of wit with any man alive, but he refuses games of chance on principle, as if probability were an insult to intelligence. That is why, when he decided to bait a killer at midnight, I knew he had put something more valuable than a ledger on the table: his own pride. He sat behind his desk with the payoff book open in front of him, the page marked C monthly held down by a paperweight, as if it might try to crawl away. Fritz had brought coffee. Wolfe had not touched it. When Wolfe ignores coffee, it means his mind is chewing something tougher. Archie, he said, we will leak a handoff. I blinked. Leak it to who? The Hudson River. To the men who have been attempting to edit this story, Wolfe replied. They will hear it. They cannot resist hearing it. Saul Panzer stood by the door, quiet and solid. Where? He asked. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Here. I stared. In your house. In my house. Wolfe confirmed, as if that settled the issue the way a court stamp settles a lawsuit. At midnight. You will be seen leaving with a parcel. You will be heard speaking of delivering it to the district attorney. The word will travel where it is intended. That's a nice plan, I said. It also sounds like the kind of plan that ends with me becoming seasonal defacor. Wolfe's gaze held mine. You will not be harmed. That's reassuring, I said. By whom? By Mr. Panzer, Wolfe replied, and the way he said it made Saul sound less like a man and more like a policy. Saul's face didn't change, but I could feel the room grow a degree safer in his silence. Wolfe pressed his button. Fritz appeared. Fritz, Wolfe said. Telephone, Mr. Cohen. Lon Cohen arrived within the hour, bringing the smell of cold air and opportunity. Wolfe told him precisely what to print and precisely how to phrase it, and Lon, who had learned long ago that Wolfe's instructions are worth more than his own instincts, nodded and took notes. A midnight delivery, Lon said, eyes bright. To the district attorney. Not directly, Wolfe corrected. To Inspector Kramer. He will escort it. In theory, you will not mention Inspector Kramer. You will imply, rather than state, that the police will be involved. Lon grinned. You want the bad boys nervous. I want them predictable, Wolfe said. Lon left, already composing headlines in his head. Fritz returned to the kitchen as if baiting killers were merely another household errand. He leaned forward and tapped the ledger page. What if they don't come? Wolfe's lip curled faintly. They will come. They have come repeatedly. They cannot tolerate loss of control. This ledger is not merely evidence. It is a monthly expense. Men do not abandon monthly expenses. They renegotiate them. By stabbing people, I said. By stabbing people, Wolfe agreed, untroubled. At 10:30, Saul checked the house the way an engineer checks a bridge, quietly, thoroughly, assuming failure is possible and refusing to be surprised by it. He positioned himself where he could see the front door, the side hall, and the stairs. He had 2 additional men outside, Fred Durkin and Ori Cather, because Wolfe doesn't like crowds, but he does like competence, and he can tolerate Fred and Ori in small doses. At 11, Kramer called. His voice was already irritated. Wolfe, I got a rumor that you're handing evidence to the DA at midnight. What is this nonsense? Wolfe's tone was mild. Inspector, if you have received the rumor, it is already serving its purpose. What purpose? Kramer barked. To attract criminals, Wolfe said. Try to keep up. Kramer swore. Don't play games. You're obstructing. Wolfe cut him off. "Inspector, come to my house at midnight, or do not come. But if you come early and blunder about like an ox, you will ruin everything." There was a long silence on the line, thick with Kramer's desire to argue and his fear of being left out. Finally, he growled, "Fine, I'll be there, and your boy stays put." Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. "Archie will be precisely where I require him." Wolfe hung up and looked at me. "You see, even Inspector Kramer is bait." At 11:30, Wolfe sent me upstairs to change into my best coat, the one that makes me look less like a suspect and more like a citizen with expensive habits. When I came down, Fritz handed me a small parcel wrapped in plain brown paper and tied with string. "What is it?" I asked. Fritz's face was solemn. "Books," he said. "Books," I repeated, startled. "Cookbooks," Fritz corrected, with the faintest hint of amusement. "Mr. Wolfe's." He lowered his voice. "Mr. Wolfe said, if they steal them, it will be a personal insult." That was Wolfe's heart on the table, not the ledger, but his dignity. At 5 minutes to midnight, the house settled into a hush so complete I could hear the radiator tick. Wolfe sat in the red chair, massive and unyielding, as if he had become part of the furniture, and the furniture had become judgment. "You will exit," Wolfe said. "Walk down the steps and proceed toward the corner, as if to hail a taxi. You will carry the parcel visibly." "And if I'm shot?" I asked. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Do not be shot." I went to the door. Saul opened it and stood half a step behind me. His presence felt like a second coat. Outside, West 35th Street wore winter, the way it wears everything, impatiently. A few cars hissed past on wet pavement. Holiday lights glowed in windows, like cheerful lies. I descended the steps with the parcel under my arm and walked toward the corner. I did not look around like a man expecting trouble. I looked around like a man deciding whether to buy roasted chestnuts halfway to the corner. I heard a footstep behind me, soft, controlled. I kept walking, another step, then a whisper, close to my ear. "Mr. Goodwin." My spine tightened. I stopped and turned slowly. A hooded man stood close enough that I could smell him, smoke like a fireplace, and something cleaner underneath. His face was shadowed. His right hand was in his pocket. His shoes were dark, square-toed, and the left bore a faint scuff. "Nice night," I said, "for singing carols." He didn't laugh. "Give me the parcel." "Why?" I asked. "It's a gift." His voice stayed calm. "Because you do not want to die for it." "That depends," I said. "What's inside?" His eyes flicked. "A fraction. The ledger." "No," I said lightly. "Cookbooks." He shifted, impatient. His hand in the pocket tightened. I could see the outline of something short, rigid. Then Saul moved. He came out of the darkness by the stoop like a decision finally made. In one motion he seized the hooded man's wrist, twisted and brought the man's arm out of the pocket. A knife flashed, short blade, black handle, the same model from the hardware shop, the kind you can buy in bulk if you are civic, minded and violent. The hooded man tried to wrench free. Saul did not fight him. Saul simply applied fact to bone. The knife clattered onto the pavement. Ori and Fred appeared from nowhere because that is their job when Saul is present. Ori grabbed the man's shoulder. Fred grabbed the other. The hooded man's hood fell back, and I saw his face under the streetlight. Len Ferris Harrogate, the shadow with the silver shield pin. His eyes went wide when he saw me smile.
"You, Ferris," hissed.
"Me," I said, "and I didn't even have to buy a knife under your name." Ferris jerked once more, then sagged as Saul's grip made resistance seem childish. A car screeched to a stop at the curb. Kramer burst out of it like a man who had been promised a confession and feared he might miss it. 2 plainclothes men followed. "What the hell?" Kramer began. Then saw Ferris held between Ori and Fred, saw the knife on the pavement, and his face did a complicated dance between triumph and confusion. Then his eyes landed on me and the parcel under my arm. He recovered his anger as usual. "Goodwin, put your hands where I can see them." I lifted the parcel. "I'm holding recipes, Inspector." Kramer shoved past me, and jabbed a finger at Ferris. "Who's this?" Wolfe's voice came from the stoop behind us, deep and calm. He had not come down the steps. He had simply appeared in the doorway, framed by warm light, like a judge who refuses to step into the street for testimony. "Inspector," Wolfe said, "this is Mr. Len Ferris of Harrogate Protective. He has come to retrieve what he believes I intend to deliver to your superiors." Kramer's jaw tightened. "Ferris," he growled, "you're under arrest." Ferris's eyes flashed. "For what?" "For being where you shouldn't be," Kramer snapped. Then he turned on me again, because Kramer's habits are also predictable. "And you? Don't think this clears you. Goodwin, you staged this. You and Wolfe staged it." I stared at him. "Kramer, I staged getting stabbed." "You staged the setup." Kramer barked. "You threatened the hardware clerk." Wolfe's voice cut through the cold. "Inspector, enough." Kramer whirled. "You don't tell me." Wolfe raised his hand, not in drama, but in dismissal. "Inspector, if you insist on rearresting my assistant, you will have to explain something first." Kramer's eyes narrowed. "Explain what?" Wolfe stepped forward, just enough for the streetlight to touch his face. "Explain why this ledger," he said, "contains a monthly payment to a person identified only as C." Kramer froze. The air seemed to harden. Wolfe continued, voice even. "Mr. Ferris has attempted to reclaim it. Mr. Dunham was killed to keep it from testimony. My assistant was framed to divert your attention from it. The question is not whether Mr. Goodwin followed Mr. Dunham. The question is who receives money monthly to ensure your attention follows where it is directed." Kramer's face reddened, then went pale under the red. His mouth opened, shut, opened again. "You're saying," he began. "I am saying nothing," Wolfe replied. "I am showing you a fact. The fact is a monthly payment. You may interpret it as you wish, Inspector, but you can no longer interpret it comfortably." Kramer looked down at the knife on the pavement, then at Ferris's controlled face, then at Wolfe, who stood in his doorway like the house itself had decided to speak. For the first time since Ray Dunham bled on the sidewalk, doubt cracked Kramer's certainty like a fissure in concrete. He swallowed hard. "Where is the ledger?" he asked, and his voice was no longer triumphant. It was wary. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "In my safe." Kramer's jaw tightened. "I want it." "You will have it," Wolfe said, "when you are ready to treat it as evidence and not as inconvenience." Kramer stared at Wolfe for a long beat, long enough for the street to seem quiet around us. Then he jerked his head at his men. "Take Ferris," he barked. "Now." They did. Ferris went stiff, then tried a smile that did not hold. As the car door slammed and the engine started, Kramer remained on the curb, staring at Wolfe's doorway. "You're playing with fire," he said low. Wolfe's voice was mild. "No, Inspector, I am using it. You are the one who has been warming his hands at someone else's blaze." Kramer's eyes narrowed again. But the wall had cracked, and he knew it. He looked at me. "Don't leave town," he said, less sure than before. "I'll be home," I replied. "Where the cookbooks are." Kramer turned and walked to his car, shoulders stiff, and drove off with a man in custody and a new problem in his mind. I went back up the stoop with the parcel under my arm, and Wolfe watched me enter, as if I were a piece moved on a board exactly where he wanted it. Inside, the office was warm and quiet, and Wolfe's eyes were bright with something that might have been satisfaction if he were capable of showing it in public. "Archie," he said, "tonight we have seized the shadow, and tomorrow," I asked. Wolfe's mouth tightened into a thin line. "Tomorrow we summon the men who cast it." He leaned back in the red chair, massive and implacable. "Prepare yourself. We will have an office gathering." That was the hook, and it caught me the way it always does. Because when Wolfe says office gathering, it means someone is about to learn that the story they tried to control has been rewritten. In ink they can't erase. Chapter 10 by 11 the next morning. Wolfe had arranged his office the way he arranges everything, as if the room itself were an argument, and he intended to win it with furniture. The red chair faced the desk like a throne facing a court. The yellow chairs waited for witnesses, suspects, and fools. The payoff ledger, photographed, copied, and now sealed in Wolfe's safe, had been replaced on the blotter by a single sheet of paper with C monthly, written on it in Wolfe's neat hand, like a label on a specimen jar. Inspector Kramer arrived first, because anxiety makes him punctual. He looked as if he had slept in his shoes and argued in his dreams. "You better have something," he growled. Wolfe regarded him with mild distaste. "Inspector, I always have something. You usually misplace it." Kramer ignored that and planted himself in the red chair without permission, then shifted as if the chair's dignity offended him. Saul Panzer came next, silent and composed. Ori and Fred hovered in the hall, out of sight, but not out of reach because Wolfe likes a clean room and an unclean contingency. Then Fritz admitted the men Wolfe had summoned with a few carefully placed phone calls. Len Ferris of Harrogate Protective, brought in by 2 detectives and looking less sleek without his coat, a Harrogate attorney with a face like a locked cash box, Mrs. Alma Fenn, pale and furious at herself, and, last, Harlan Grieve. Grieve entered as if he owned the brownstone. He was tall, carefully tailored, with hair too perfect for a man who claims to build things. His smile was the same kind of smile Ray Dunham had worn in his office. The smile of a man who believes he can buy the room if he can't charm it. He looked at Wolfe as though Wolfe were an odd piece of antique furniture. "Mr. Wolfe, this is ridiculous." "It is," Wolfe agreed, "but not for the reason you imagine. Sit down, Mr. Grieve." Grieve's smile tightened. He sat in a yellow chair with the reluctance of a man paying for parking. Kramer leaned forward. "Wolfe, if this is about Goodwin." Wolfe's hand rose, and Kramer shut his mouth as if the hand had been a physical object. "This," Wolfe said, "is about a fraud matter, a murdered witness, and a frame constructed with admirable efficiency. Mr. Ferris will assist us." Ferris's mouth opened. "I'm not saying—" Wolfe's gaze held him. "You will. You attempted to retrieve evidence at my doorstep. You have been arrested in possession of a knife identical to the murder weapons model, and you are employed by men who prefer their stories controlled. Your choices are limited." Ferris's jaw worked. He glanced at his attorney, who began to speak. Wolfe's voice cut in, cold and final. "If you interrupt, sir, I will have you removed and continue without you. Mr. Ferris can speak quite adequately when he is frightened." Kramer snorted. "He's already frightened." Ferris swallowed. His eyes flicked to Grieve, then away quickly, as if looking at Grieve too long might be hazardous. "All right," Ferris said hoarsely. "All right. You want the story. I'll give it to you." Wolfe nodded once. "Proceed. Begin with the cameras." Ferris licked his lips. "We looped them," he said. "Not everywhere, just where we needed it. Lobby camera. Side street. The lunch counter camera was the one we didn't control. That's why you got it." I said. "So you wanted a clean timeline?" Ferris nodded, miserable. "We needed Goodwin seen. We needed him tied to Dunham publicly. The argument. Dunham was told to push it, make it loud, make it look like blackmail." Grieve shifted in his chair, a subtle movement, like a man hearing his name in a room he expected to control. Kramer barked. "Dunham was told." Ferris swallowed. "He didn't know he'd die. He thought he'd get protected. He thought he'd be moved out hidden, paid. He was scared about testifying." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "And you offered him safety?" Ferris gave a bitter laugh. "We offered him silence." He continued, words spilling now as if once begun they had to finish. "We planted the knife purchase. A man came in, used Goodwin's name, bought the model we already had, plenty of community patrol supplies. That's what we called it. We made a receipt look neat. Then we got it onto Dunham." "How?" Kramer demanded. Ferris's gaze dropped. "After the stab, before the cops went through his pockets. We had a man close, he slipped it in. I felt my stomach tighten. On the sidewalk." Ferris nodded. "Crowd helps, everyone's watching. Nobody's seeing." Wolfe said, "The witness." Ferris glanced at Mrs. Fenn, who looked as if she might faint again. "We had them," he admitted. "The kid, the delivery kid. Easy threaten his mother. Mrs. Fenn." She wasn't threatened. She was. Recruited, safety talk, community patrol pin. She wanted to help. Mrs. Fenn's eyes filled. I didn't. Wolfe raised a finger. She stopped, trembling. The clerk, I said. Ferris's mouth tightened. He started talking wrong, so we corrected him. By beating him, Kramer growled. Ferris nodded once. We couldn't have him sticking with, not Archie. We needed the story to stay straight. Wolfe's voice was very quiet. And Dunham. Ferris's eyes went blank for a moment. Fast, he said. That was the instruction. One stab, in public, clean. He'd been warned to cooperate. He didn't. Ferris hesitated. Saul's voice came softly from the corner, the same quiet pressure that breaks locks and men. Len, Ferris cracked. His shoulders slumped. Harlan Grieve, he said. The room seemed to hold its breath. Grieve's smile didn't vanish. It simply stiffened, like plaster setting. That's absurd, he said. This man is lying to save himself. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Mr. Ferris is not lying. He is confessing because he has discovered the disadvantage of a ledger. It records. Kramer shot up from the red chair. Grieve, he barked, and his voice had changed. No longer the voice of a man certain of Archie's guilt, but the voice of a man who suddenly sees the real target. You're coming in. Grieve rose smoothly, palms out, political and polished. Inspector, this is ridiculous. I have counsel. I have. You've got a dead witness. Kramer snapped. He turned on Wolfe. Where's that ledger? Wolfe's expression was bland. In my safe, as I told you. I want it now, Kramer said. You will receive it, Wolfe replied. With a receipt, and you will treat it as evidence, not inconvenience. Kramer's jaw tightened, but he nodded sharply at one of his detectives. Get a warrant now, and call the DA. Grieve's attorney began to speak. Wolfe looked at him as one looks at a fly on a dessert. You may buzz elsewhere. The detectives moved. Grieve's face finally lost its color. Ferris, watching Grieve, seemed to find a last shred of courage in the collapse of the man who had paid him. He paid monthly, Ferris blurted, to keep things quiet. To keep steps predictable, that's what the C was. Contacts, call routing, fixers. We knew where the cops would go because someone told us. Kramer went still. Then he turned slowly to Wolfe. That wasn't me, he said. And it was not a question. Wolfe's tone was dry. Inspector, your virtues are many, but subtle corruption is not among them. You are too loud. For a second, despite everything, I almost laughed. Even Kramer's anger paused, insulted and oddly gratified. Wolfe continued. Frames fail when truth gets the last nail. Mr. Grieve believed he could build a story the way he builds towers, steel, concrete, and contracts. But stories are not structures. They are sequences of facts, and facts, unlike contractors, do not accept bribes. Kramer's men had Ferris in handcuffs already, and now they moved toward Grieve with a warrant on the way, and the appetite of professionals finally allowed to bite the right man. Kramer jabbed a finger at me as he passed, more from habit than conviction. Goodwin, don't think I'm apologizing. I'd faint, I said. It would ruin the furniture. Kramer grunted, but his eyes had shifted. They no longer held me as a suspect. They held me as a nuisance who had survived. When the door closed behind them and the house settled again into its proper calm, Wolfe leaned back in the red chair and allowed himself one small breath of satisfaction. I rubbed the faint marks on my wrists where the cuffs had been and said, So I'm cleared. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. Yes, Archie, you are restored to your customary innocence. Thanks, I said. I'll wear it carefully. Wolfe reached for his bell. Fritz, he called. Bring beer. Fritz appeared as if summoned by justice itself. As the glasses were set down, and the brownstone's warmth wrapped around us again, I looked at Wolfe, orchid man, gourmet tyrant, armchair judge, and felt the day's ugliness settle into order. Wolfe, I said, you put your heart on the table last night. Do not be sentimental. I'm not, I said. I'm observant. He lifted his glass with the solemnity of a man toasting not victory but correctness. Then observe this, Archie. A frame is a carpenter's trick. It holds things in place until the real structure is finished. But if you hammer truth hard enough, the frame splits. I lifted my glass. To truth, I said. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. To the last nail.